Welcome and thank you for joining us. We have a fascinating and very timely webinar today for you, Navigating AI Compliance in Life Sciences, FDA Policy Insights for AI Governance. We're really excited to have you here with us today. We have two incredible speakers who will be joining us. First is Danielle Faruq, who currently works at the FDA as a digital health specialist for the Digital Health Center of Excellence, and she leads AI and digital health policy initiatives. And we also have Renee VonBergen, who is our Vice President of Data and AI here at MasterControl. Before we get started, I do have a few housekeeping items to cover. If you need any assistance during today's broadcast, there is a chat function at the bottom of your screen. Please send us a message there and we will work to resolve any issues. There's also a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Please use that to ask questions during today's webinar. You can ask those questions at any time, but we will be addressing them during a dedicated time for Q&A at the end of our session here. For today's agenda, Danielle is going to lead us off with the FDA's perspective on AI governance, and then Renee will talk to us about MasterControl's embedded AI approach and also how your organization can take action starting today to prepare for compliant AI use. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have time for a few Q&A questions. I'm going to get us kicked off here with just some really fascinating stats that we found through some of our own research. MasterControl conducted this research around digital maturity and AI adoption using an online survey that was distributed among quality and manufacturing leaders who work full-time in life sciences. And while it is still early days, now is a great time to develop and define the governance because the stats from the recent research really showed us that the vast majority of quality organizations, about 71%, are in what we would call the piloting mode, meaning that they are still testing one or two use cases for AI. Another 25% describe themselves as scaling, meaning that they are expanding those pilots that have already shown some success. And only about 3% are still in the early researching and business case building phase. Interestingly, nobody said that they were going to not explore AI at all. But I think that as we are looking at how this is going to be navigated with compliance and with regulations, it's really important to note that people are still figuring this out. And there is still time to make sure that your organization is moving forward in the correct way and making sure that you choose those correct pilots and move into what you're really scaling. And so with that brief introduction of kind of where the industry sits at today, we are going to move into Danielle's portion of the presentation on the FDI's perspective on AI governance. Welcome, Danielle. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here. We can jump into the slides. So I wanted to kind of step back and explain where I'm coming from and where I sit at FDA. So I am part of the Digital Health Center of Excellence, or DHCOE, in FDA's Center for Devices and Radiological Health, or CDRH. And we focus on developing policy and resources for the total product life cycle of AI-enabled medical device. So those are devices that actually meet the definition of device and not necessarily tools that are used in manufacturing or other healthcare applications. We at FDA CDRH have cleared and approved over 1,000 devices that incorporate AI to date, and more get cleared or approved every day. So obviously, this is an area of great interest for us and for our stakeholders or sponsors. Because we focus on AI-enabled medical devices and not necessarily tools that are used to manufacture such devices or perhaps drugs or cosmetics, we don't provide necessarily policy on those types of applications, but we think that the considerations that are unique and important for AI-enabled medical devices may also be relevant to AI more generally. And so, I think that when we think about, how to regulate these devices, though that type of thinking can be applied to many types of tools or products that incorporate AI. And so I'll go through some of those considerations next. So as I said, these are some of the considerations that we focus on for AI-enabled medical devices. The keyword there is some. There are a lot of considerations one should make when building, testing, and deploying AI devices. These are just a select few that we focus on and that we think are pretty important when regulating these types of devices. So I'll jump into the first one, data quality and management. As you probably already know, these models and devices rely heavily on the data that they're trained on. And so it's important to train these models on data of good quality and that is managed adequately. And there are all kinds of standards and best practices out there in the industry about data management and quality. And so we're not trying to rewrite those standards or best practices. We also rely heavily on the principles that are part of those resources. But what we focus on is fit for purpose and representative data. And that's for, people maybe building, training, testing the tools, but also maybe perhaps the people that are acquiring those tools for their purposes. It's important to perhaps understand the data on which the model is trained so that as the buyer of the tool, for lack of a better term, can understand how the tool is built and how it could be applicable to your particular workflow. So the question you might ask is, does the data used to train the model represent your particular workflow? Next is human oversight. So we've been thinking about this a lot. And actually, of those over 1,000 devices that we've cleared or approved, we have not yet cleared or approved one that is fully autonomous. We still haven't gotten to the point where a human is completely out of the loop. It's obviously coming, and it exists in other workflows outside of the medical device industry, of course, but we still think it's important to have a human in the loop across the entire product life cycle. There's actually a really interesting example that I'll go into on the next slide about a human not being in the loop and a warning letter that was subsequently sent out to a company that was being audited from FDA because of that. Next is transparency. When we say transparency, we're talking about clear, essential information to relevant audiences at the most appropriate time. And so the way we think about this is, for example, if an AI device is being used in an emergency situation, we expect that the manufacturer of that device provide the information necessary for a clinician to make a decision in that situation quickly and effectively. So, what are the critical pieces of information that a clinician should understand with regards to the output of the AI device? Again, such that they can make an informed decision about what to do about their patient in that emergency situation. So, maybe not totally relevant to like an AI tool used for manufacturing, but the principles still apply because it's just important for the user of an AI tool, that human in the loop, to have the information they need to understand the outputs of the AI model or device at the most appropriate time and in the most appropriate location or manner. So, for example, it shouldn't be buried in a user manual that no one ever opens. It's incredibly helpful for that type of information to be in front of the user on the user interface or on a label that's close by so that, again, the person using the tool can fully understand the outputs of the AI device and maybe the limitations or some of the training data that might have contributed and how that applies to their particular workflow. Next, we have ongoing monitoring. So as you probably know, there are rules and regulations around monitoring devices generally, and that's no different for AI-enabled medical devices. But we know that AI-enabled medical devices may perform differently than what was shown in a pre-market submission, for example. And we know that AI is potentially more prone to performance degradation, such as drift versus rules-based systems. So we think that robust infrastructure to enable continuous performance assessment is really important for these types of devices. And that could be, real-time monitoring capabilities or automated escalation pathways, such that someone can, again, that human in the loop on the monitoring side of things can detect when issues may start to occur, and can address those issues quickly. And then finally, we have governance, which is really just talking about the frameworks, processes, and standards that are used as part of the development and deployment of AI-enabled medical devices. And we think that this should spread, of course, across the life cycle of a medical device, but even outside the life cycle, for example, at the organization level, making sure people understand the AI that's being used, the outputs, the limitations, what should and should not be relied on, just all those things that are important when using an AI-enabled medical device or AI tool more generally. And this governance is really to ensure safe, ethical, responsible AI development and deployment. I do want to note the source of a lot of this information is this IMDRF draft document that's listed at the bottom of the slide. It's called Technical Framework for Artificial Intelligence Lifecycle Management. It's something that we as FDA worked on with a group of international regulators as well as industry stakeholders. So it really represents a lot of people thinking about these types of devices from different perspectives to really hone in on what's important throughout the life cycle of these types of devices. And while it's still in draft, and we're actually soliciting public feedback on it as we speak, it is an important document that sort of aggregates all the different information and resources that one might look to when building these types of devices. Next slide. So I mentioned a use case of human oversight that I thought was super interesting that occurred a couple, I guess, a month or so ago. And just a caveat here that I'm no way involved in this from the FDA standpoint. I'm consuming this from a public perspective, just like any one of you would be. But when reading this warning letter of the Purolea Cosmetics Lab that was sent on April 2nd, 2026, there was a section amongst many other sections of the inappropriate use of artificial intelligence in pharmaceutical manufacturing. And from what I gather from the warning letter, it looks like they were using an AI agent to understand what regulations they should adhere to or what regulations they needed to comply to for the type of manufacturing they were doing in their facility. And it looks like the AI agent did not provide them with a certain legal requirement. And when asked about this, the company said the AI agent never told them it was required. So the auditor obviously picked up on this and provided some feedback in the warning letter related to the use of AI and the need for the review and clearance by an authorized human representative when any output or recommendations are consumed from an AI agent. So this is just actually like a real life example of a human being out of the loop, the AI not being correct, and then the company ultimately being out of compliance because of that. So we all know that AI is not 100% correct all the time, right? And so again, it's important to verify the outputs, make sure there's an understanding of those outputs and how they apply to your particular situation or workflow. Next slide. Yeah. I've just provided several resources from FDA. Many of them are still in draft. Like I mentioned, the IMDRF document is still under public consultation, or some of the guidance documents that we've put out there are still in draft. And, you know, it's draft guidances are always subject to change, and we work hard to incorporate public feedback to then make those changes. But, you know, they can kind of show you where we're headed in terms of the way we're thinking about these types of devices, and what you might expect to see from us. The one that is final is the good machine learning practice for medical device development. So again, a lot of the themes I talked about today are part of that document as well. And it's a really quick read and easy document for you to kind of think about and apply to your particular situation at the principles level. So I definitely recommend jumping into that one, and then keeping up to date on the others that will hopefully ultimately be finalized very soon. I think that's it for me. I'll hand it back to Jessica or maybe Renee.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in here. Thank you, Danielle, very much. I know that many folks who I interact with from MasterControl customer perspective are always eager to hear what the FDA has to say. So thank you for weighing in on some really good, I think, just a great framework. And in fact, I'm going to steal some of that because it is so applicable, and kind of leverage that to show how we're dealing with that type of guidance, just good practice in general. A little bit first, I wanted to explain I am responsible at MasterControl for data and for AI. I'm actually on the product management side. I have engineering counterparts, security counterparts, compliance counterpart. I mean, tons of people go into building a product, whether it's AI related or simply more general software. And so my function really sits at the center of that. So what I'm going to show you today is really the work of many, many people trying to put some of that best practice into our software applications. So I'm going to go ahead and show you a few things. We can go ahead to the next slide. And as I do, I just want to emphasize that what we're talking about is now. This isn't aspirational. It's a reaction to what needs to be happening now. And hopefully you can incorporate that in the same manner, acting on it now. One thing I want to start with is really talking about AI compliance. Frequently in my role, I frequently start with a technical approach, talking about models and a whole AI stack. And I will get into that a little bit, but I don't want to skip ahead too early because really this is why we're here. We're talking about how to remain compliant in a regulated industry when AI is coming fast and furious down the pipe for us. So we've started not with oh yeah, then there's AI, what do we do with it? But really started building it into our platform foundation. And so I want to show you some of that as we go along here. Our North Star, as we say, right? What is it that's directing us or guiding us? It's really it's what's wrapped up into compliance, and the best package that we pursued related to that is ISO 42001, and that is a relatively new. I think it came out in 23. Relatively new ISO certification. It's very important as far as AI governance goes. It's actually an AI MS, which is AI management system certification that we have. We recently, in fact, went through a third-party audit for it again as an annual renewal and got that. That was in the last month or so. 42001 in terms of AI is you can think of it as how important 9001 is, for instance, related to quality systems. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. And there's other ISO certifications that we have and aspire to continue to remain certified in. And this is really, as far as AI is concerned, another one of those certifications in our tool belt. So let's jump into some things here. On the next slide, I confessed early on that I was going to steal some of those pillars, and I've stolen every single one of them. So thank you very much for that, the skeleton to work with here. I'm going to jump in to these 5 pillars, and I'll go into detail a little bit after we go to the next slide. But on this slide, I just want to give kind of a one-liner about how we're approaching each of these things. For data quality, this is no different, whether this is just master control software with or without AI. Data quality is very important, management, security, et cetera, right? Where remain in tenant-based silos, your data cannot be leaked to another tenant. All of that still applies to everything that we do within software and AI together. Human oversight, human in the loop is an industry term that you'll hear frequently, embraced by you'll hear it in every AI related conversation that there is. It's incredibly important. And it's not just any human in the loop. I think Danielle used the term authorized human, right? We think of it and you need an expert human. The reason is, right, you need to provide oversight. And so if the person is clueless about what the AI is doing, they cannot provide proper oversight. And so we think of this as expert human in the loop. Transparency, I'm going to show you how we try to help that human assess what the AI is doing and why. For ongoing monitoring, again, similar to data quality management, this is very similar to our software development, even without AI. We continually monitor for any performance that's not expected, whether that's uptime, bugs, anything that is deviating from what might be expected. When it comes to AI, we also monitor things like accuracy in terms of relevance and truthfulness. The drift that Danielle had talked about, we are monitoring for that as well. And then governance, I'd fall back, especially to that ISO 42001 certification, just because it's a really nice package. But we also have a lot of other things, self-governance even, that we publish. We have an AI Trust Center, for instance, on our site where you can go and find out information about how we approach responsible AI development. So let's jump into each one of these and we'll go a little bit deeper. The first pillar, data quality and management. Essentially, again, right, this is our data governance is not affected at all as far as the difference between AI software and non-AI software from a master control perspective. One thing that's important is a little note down at the bottom where it says validated sources. This is really important. We do not send your data outside our system to another vendor or processor. What does this mean? This is where I have to get into the AI stack a little bit, not too much detail, but essentially what's happening when you say that you want to perform any sort of task. Just like any other software, we need to determine what that task is, how we need to process it, what data we need, et cetera. But in the case of AI, that particularly generative AI, we're going to use an LLM to help complete that task. And so several things lead to that. First of all, you might have heard the term prompt before. Even when you enter something as a person, a user, we are actually taking that input and turning it into an engineering prompt. So even the prompt itself is controlled by master control. We then turn that over to some agents. That also is probably a very familiar term to you. And those agents have access to tools that we give them so that they can decide what to do best. So for instance, if the task is to translate something, they're going to use a translation related tool, as opposed to in our exam generation, that particular tool might not be useful and they'll use a different tool. So the agents have some autonomy to decide what tools to use. And then that is sent to the LLM. The LLM is also within our data platform. And so when we say we don't send your data outside to a processor, there are several companies who have great LLMs, models, large language models is what that stands for. And they will sign contracts with you that says, they won't train on your data, et cetera, which is very important. However, when you're doing that, you do lose some, right? We consider ourselves the custodian of your data. And if we were to send it outside to another third party, we would temporarily lose that custody. So we don't do that. Everything is in-house for us. So those models, the LLMs, right? There are several different ones that are used, and it depends on the task. We own all of the ones that we use for any task. And those models, this is a question I get all the time. Do your models use our customer data to train? The answer is no. So in the beginning, right, those models are not trained on customer data. What are they trained on? They're actually trained on publicly available data that's useful to us from a commercial standpoint. We always use sources that are available under an MIT or an Apache 2 license. So we have permission to use that publicly available or public trained data. And we haven't found a need at all to use customer data for training. The public sources provide us what we need. We sometimes go after particular sources based again on the model that's the purpose of the model. But again, that is not your customer data. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, your data does stay segregated in those tenant pillars or silos, and there is no leakage there. Let's jump into the second pillar. I won't spend so much time on this because this is just incorporated into everything. We always think of AI as MasterControl AI as assistive. It's not autonomous. Deliberately making you as a human, right, as a person, are responsible for that. It's simply helping you do your job better, whether it's now with fewer resources, because as we know, every company is resource constrained these days, might help you see things faster, might help you see things that maybe just as a human brain wouldn't be able to detect, right? So always assistive. Essentially, we have controls. Some might be roles-based, others are simply as a system admin, you decide whether or not to grant a license to any of your users to use some of these tools. In cases where there's not that sort of thing, there's an incorporation. Something that like search, for example, would be you as the user, right, would initiate that search. So there's always some control there. And again, we're not operating autonomously. So I think that's kind of a takeaway to remember. Always assistive, never autonomous. I want to show you briefly, this is our exam generator, just the first screen. Here, we're actually asking you to upload a particular document, an SOP, for instance. And then when you do that, on the next screen, we see that you are now able to point the AI to what parts of your SOP are important for generating exams. So when we were in beta testing with this, probably a year and a half or maybe even 2 years ago now, we did have customers who said, we always want to generate exam questions on the appendix. And other customers are like, really? You're kidding. That's just supporting material. So we don't assume that we know what you want to test on. So you're going to go ahead and point to those sections from which exams should be generated. And then on the next slide, we see that the AI has come back with draft questions and answers. Now, this is a multiple choice format, so there is a correct answer. And then there are other distractor answers, which seem like they could be answers, but are in fact wrong. And our users actually tell us that many times it's actually harder to come up with those wrong answers that are reasonable than otherwise. And if you don't like the question, you can regenerate it, you can trash it and start over again, or you can edit it from here. So again, you have complete control over that. Let's go ahead to the next slide then. This is just the last piece of it. As far as integrating into our training modules, you can download those questions and answers and then import them into the training module. They come downloaded in the proper format for that. So that's our exam generator. I wanted to talk about through the demonstration, really, our screenshots of another product, talk briefly about transparency. We always try to cite our sources. Now, in the case of exam generator, obviously the source was something that you provided. And you are pointing to different sections, and so you know where those come from. But you notice the side by side where you could see the question and answer, and then it related back to the source that it came from, which paragraphs or sections you had selected for that. That's a form of transparency, and it's always really important to see where the AI is coming from here. So go ahead and please advance to the next slide. I'm going to show you a product that we have. It's called Regulatory Chat. It allows you to query the CFR and other global regulations and ask questions about that. Here's an example where a question was asked, and then on the next slide, we see the output of that. So how are medical devices classified? You see that an answer is generated here, and then on the next slide, you see kind of the full view of that screen. Over on the right side are the citations from which that answer was generated. And it's important to look through those to understand, this one might be particularly important, and maybe I'm going to choose to not pay as much attention maybe to a lower priority citation or something like that. And then also not just for checking answers, but these citations are useful. So for instance, if you're creating an SOP, you might want to take some of these citations and put them in the reference section. So that's how we try one way in which we try to be transparent. Let's go ahead and jump out of this, and we'll go on to pillar 4, ongoing monitoring. I pretty much covered this just in the overview, the one-liners that were a little bit longer than one line. These are some of the things that we're watching for, right? We always have a baseline. Well, even before this, right? Any software that's developed, always we think like, what is the task to be performed? Said another way, what's the intent of that software? How are we going to use data? What data is required? What type of user interaction is going to be required? All of that. So that is really, I guess, the first thing that wouldn't even be on the slide. It's to the far left. And then once that is there, then we're going to monitor from there, right? So is our model performing correctly? And if it crosses any threshold that's unacceptable, then we go ahead, just in the same way that, a bug report, we go, oh, that's not good, right? And so we make corrections. There are escalations that can happen. If that happens, then in the same way that any other thing is fixed within MasterControl software, it is always happens through controlled change management, and we have a path for communications that come out relative, for instance, to release notes would be a vehicle for that. We do also sometimes change models. Frequently, we tie those to the features themselves. So why would we change a model? Sometimes because it includes better quality, right? You get slightly better answers or slightly more relevant answers or something like that. Models are changing all the time. We change our models all the time. But one reason a model might change also is just flat out for new features. So if we decide, as we did with Exam Generator, for instance, it came out in English only, and we said we were going to support other languages, and so a model change was required for that. And then we have quarterly meetings under the AIMC, that is AI and MasterControl governance, which relate to some of the things that are required for ISO certification as well for that. So that's how we handle ongoing monitoring. And then finally, for the 5th pillar, show that slide. Again, I refer back to ISO 42001. It is, it's probably right now one of the best packages that you can get to, kind of say, here's the encapsulation of what we're doing, how we're handling that documentation. It is something that a third party audits. So it's not something that you can just say on a slide. You actually have to follow through with that. And then we have all sorts of documentation that goes into that. So we have impact assessments and all of that that have to come out, be documented for every any type of AI that is involved with MasterControl software. So that's how we're handling AI governance there. And then next, one of the things that we have, you can go, I think this is a build here. We have one of our policy documents is our AIMS AI Management System Manual. And there it's very comprehensive about what we need to do, starting from the beginning to deployment and ongoing maintenance. So we have internal documentation that helps us out here too. One of the things that is important to emphasize, right? All of this has been kind of a flood of information to you, talking about the framework that's required that Danielle really kicked off and how we're handling some of that. But you have responsibility too, and that's important to understand. You need to, in the same way that we're defining intended use and that sort of thing, you need to define in any time you're using AI, whether it's MasterControl or else otherwise, right? What is the intended use? How is a human going to validate that? Validate not as necessarily like the capital V word, but assess the quality and make sure that it's correct, et cetera. So you're going to need to do that. Go ahead to the next slide, please. And we'll talk about what types of things you need to do on your side, your roadmap to think about compliance in an AI world. And it includes a few things. One, you'll want to recognize or anchor on a recognized standard. For us, we find that ISO 42001 is highly defensible today. It's very well documented. We can show what we do all along the way of our software development cycle to make sure that we're in compliance with that. There are others, of course, not necessarily ISO standards, but other defensible types of documentation and policies that you can use. But you'll want to anchor on that. You're always going to want to start with low risk use cases. And in MasterControl's perspective is that we, for the foreseeable future, will never be dealing with high risk use cases. Broadly speaking, low risk means like, hey, the AI was assistive, the human is always in control. A higher risk type of thing in the software world would be the AI has made a decision and has maybe closed a complaint on your behalf with no human oversight. And we're choosing not to go there. We definitely don't want that. You want to start with low risk use cases. Ask for governance evidence. We make that available just by citing ISO standard, for instance. On our website, we also have a pretty comprehensive AI trust center. Tells you all about how we develop software and manage it and that sort of thing relative to AI. You'll always want your vendors to do that, whether it's MasterControl or not. You want to find out, don't just show us, don't just talk about it. But let us see what your guidelines are. You'll want, as we do, to stand up a cross-functional AI governance committee. Quality can't own this alone. In the same way that I describe my role as being kind of at the center of, IT, security, engineering, et cetera, you're going to want to have those same types of folks in your governance committee. Now, this governance committee may already exist. It might start out with our IT department needs to create AI policies, for instance. And you can help them with knowing how your vendor software works. For us, MasterControl, you'll find much of that documentation you'll need for your IT and legal teams, for instance, on our AI Trust Center. And then you're going to validate the use. Generative AI will always spit out something different. So for instance, if it's a summarizer, let's say that I asked you to summarize something, a document that I gave you, and you summarized it and handed it back to me, and I ripped it up and I said, okay, now summarize it again. You would not summarize it word for word in the same way, right? So generative output is always going to be different, but you are going to want to make sure that it's factual and that the key points were captured. So that's the type of thing that you'll want to be looking out for and recognizing that, yes, that is performing as expected. So that's some of the things that you can do for that. And I think, Jess, if you want to go ahead and help us out with any questions that have come up, that'd be great.
Yes, we did have a few questions, so thank you very much. And I will get into some of those right now. We're going to start with one for Danielle. It says, You mentioned that the FDA's CDRH has cleared over 1,000 AI-enabled medical devices. For life sciences companies that aren't making a medical device, say they're using AI in their QMS, like we've been talking about here, how directly do those device-focused frameworks apply to them, and should they be following that same guidance?
Yeah, thanks for the question. The nice thing about the way we've been approaching this at FDA is sort of a principles-based approach, using a lot of the resources, standards, best practices that are already out there in the industry and adopting that for our purposes. And so, while I can't recommend specifically what what you should do when deploying AI into your quality system, I think that because we're taking this principles-based approach, they should align with other best practices and standards that are not necessarily directly for medical devices per se. So, making sure the data is of good quality, incorporating transparency, human in the loop, which was mentioned a ton of times in both Renee and my presentation. So, again, by taking sort of this principles-based approach, I personally believe that these are the types of things that that would make sort of an effective AI deployment or roadmap strategy.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Renee, I have one here for you. It says your roadmap recommends standing up a cross-functional AI governance committee. In your experience, where does that most often stall? Is it to get organizational buy-in, resource constraints? What is the fastest way that companies can get this off the ground?
Boy, that question ties into the very beginning of what the slide that you showed, right? Where are companies right now? Most are in the pilot phase, but we're like rocketing forward. So I have heard many customers in a panic in terms of, oh my gosh, these tools are really useful for us, like a ground movement. We need to use them, but our IT department doesn't have a policy yet. Or I get approached often with, I said the most common question, right, was, is our data being used to train your model? Again, the answer is no. But that people are trying to figure out what's happening with these tools and how can they be safely used, et cetera. And that is the responsibility of that governance group. It could be kicked off by IT, and it commonly is. You'll want to have cross-functional teams that, include, as I mentioned, legal, IT, certainly quality, and possibly manufacturing personnel as well involved with that. If your company doesn't have that sort of policy for permissible use of an AI tool, or specifically, particular AI tools, whether those are standalone tools or just AI functionality integrated into MasterControl, for instance, it would behoove you, I think, to start kicking off that yourself. As far as the success of it is a lack of charter, lack of buy-in or something like that, I would say there's the piece where people are getting kind of surprised would be if their teams don't have a policy yet. And if you find yourself in that situation, then I would suggest that you kick that off. A great resource. I hope you guys screen grabbed Danielle's framework there, because that is like a perfect outline to follow. Bring that again with documentation about how some of those things are handled. Transparency, for instance, this is how the AI stack. We don't send your data outside to other processors, for instance. Those types of things are going to be the questions that your IT department will want to have answered. And if you already have those answers in hand, then you can really fast track some stuff. So I would say, resource wise, be familiar, at least from a MasterControl perspective, with our AI Trust Center. I think you'll find a lot of documentation there to get started on that. And from there, it should be pretty easy. It's a matter of, at that point, it's just the resource availability of your IT teams or something like that. And with so much, software improvement coming down the line, I think those teams would highly appreciate, any sort of crib notes or or fast track information that you could provide them to be able to sign off quickly.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we have time for one more question. This one is something that I think both of you can address. The roadmap slide recommends vetting AI vendors as regulated suppliers and asking for governance evidence, not just demos. What specific documentation or certifications should quality and compliance teams actually be requesting? And are there any red flags if a vendor can't produce them? Danielle, why don't we start with you, and then Renee, we'll have you give your answer as well.
All right. So I am going to sound like a broken record here, but going back to those sort of select considerations, I think are a good start to understanding how a supplier might be building, testing, deploying their AI tools. Understanding if the data that they use to train their model are fit for purposes of your particular workflow. Transparency, making sure you understand what the outputs should and should not be used for, their limitations, their accuracy, things like that. Their, governance procedures as a whole, but maybe sampling some of their procedures at a lower level to really understand how they think about deploying AI, not just deploying, building, testing, et cetera, those concepts I've mentioned before. So that you can get, you can look at those principles as a way to almost measure, their ability to meet those principles. There's no right or wrong answer on necessarily meeting those principles, but using it as a baseline can be a helpful way to approach this.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add from that. That's a really comprehensive answer. And I think, kind of the theme of everything. I would just say from MasterControl's perspective, probably the best place to start is what I was just ending with in the last question was go to the AI Trust Center, see what's there. I think it will answer a ton of questions that you might have or your IT/legal teams might have. And then, start at that governance and get going there. But as far as the documentation that you'll need, I think you'll find a lot in that center.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, we do have an excellent content piece that we would love to have you download that goes right in line with everything that we were talking about today, called Ensuring AI Compliance in Life Sciences, 5 Critical Requirements. Really, can help you dive deeper into what we've talked about today, get a little bit more information, and then give you something that you can kind of take away and really get started with on those AI governance committees. And with that, we are just so thankful that you joined us today. We are here to answer any further questions. You can always reach out to MasterControl if you have more questions on how we are handling our AI within our QMS. And again, just thank you so much for being here. And thank you to Renee and Danielle for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Same. I hope we helped you guys. AI is really exciting, and it can be scary, but it's more exciting than scary with the correct answers to all of the framework questions that we presented today. So go for it.
Thank you.